They come by the thousands, making their way to the border, hoping for freedom.
The youngest was 16 months old.
Yeah, 16 months old in his pajamas.
It affects all Americans from Brownsville, McAllen, Texas to New York City.
But where do they go? And how much is it costing American taxpayers?
The city has received close to double the amount of migrants at shelters like this than originally expected, and it's draining the city's resources.
American cities forced to figure out how to deal with the influx of people with no place to go.
We are trying to accommodate them as well to make sure that they can go ahead and begin their life here in the United States.
Right now, stories of crisis and, in their own words, stories of hope. Hello, I'm Kevin Ozebek, the investigative reporter for ABC 13, the ABC-owned station here in Houston, Texas. We've partnered with our sister stations from across America to bring you the stories of this ongoing crisis along the border and its impact in cities all around America. We want to start off with the numbers. Our ABC data team found the state of Texas has sent more than 37,900 migrants to New York City. More than 31,500 have headed to Chicago. Denver has seen more than 16,000. What is the situation like when migrants arrive in those cities? We'll take you to New York and Chicago coming up. But first, let's begin with the situation along the border. Our colleague, reporter Tom Abrams from ABC 13 Houston, recently traveled to the border with a delegation of elected officials to see for himself what is happening. Border agents and congressional leaders tell him the immigration system is broken and needs to be fixed.
Our tour brought us to the wall, where a group of 22 migrants turned themselves in. They were a mix of men, women, and young children.
The youngest was 16 months old.
Yeah, 16 months old in his pajamas.
Once the migrants are finished here at the wall, they'll be put on this bus, all of them taken to one of several processing centers. From there, if they're seeking asylum under the current policy, they'll then be released.
It's a process that plays out again and again throughout the night, every night, and into the morning. Evidence of illegal crossings litter border towns all along the 1,254 miles where Texas meets Mexico. In November, in Texas alone, there were more than 111,000 encounters between migrants and Customs and Border Protection. They come from Central and South America, China, Russia, and the Middle East. Chris Cabrera is a longtime Border Patrol agent who is with the National Union. He gave us a tour and his perspective on what's wrong.
It's like if your sink is overflowing, are you going to turn off the water or are you going to mop?
That is why a bipartisan congressional delegation is here.
We won't go file this charge if you're willing to go back to Mexico.
Led by the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCall.
I think it's important when we talk about national security that we do so as one voice, one nation, when we can. I think this hurts the entire country, the fabric of this nation. It's a human tragedy.
Hi there, how are you?
He's joined by Monica de la Cruz, a first-term congresswoman who represents this district, but who looks at the bigger picture.
At the end of the day, this is an American issue, and it affects all Americans from Brownsville, McAllen, Texas to New York City.
The lone Democrat, Henry Cuellar. He says the rest of the country is beginning to see what border towns have known for years.
People say, hey, it's okay, let the migrants in. But once you're in your own backyard, it changes things. That's why New York, Chicago, D.C. and other places are saying, wait, we can't handle that, because when they're seeing this 1,500 miles away, it's very different.
And Randy Weber, a Republican who is hoping Congress finally acts.
I think the American people are waking up.
From here, the delegation travels to Mexico City seeking help in stopping the flow of migrants before they ever get to the border.
And that was our Tom Abrams along the border. You've seen the reports of America's biggest cities seeing migrants arrive, but even mid-sized cities like Fresno, California are being impacted. 19 Venezuelan migrants recently arrived by bus in Fresno. Anchor Eliza Navarro from ABC 30 Action News in Fresno talked with some of those families about their journey and what's next for them.
This was thrust upon us. If we would have had some notice from somebody, we would have been a little bit better prepared to receive them and to go through a more organized process.
At City Hall on Friday afternoon, 19 asylum seekers from Venezuela were provided with resources and soon a health screening. Support, Councilmember Miguel Arias and Mayor Jerry Dyer say is happening at the last minute since they had no idea they were in Fresno.
We've been able to secure legal counsel for their immigration status, social services support, and some housing.
The migrants were dropped off over the weekend by a Greyhound bus. Some of them told me Fresno was not their final destination.
They originally were in El Paso. They were placed on a bus and they were given options as to what city they wanted to go to. And they ultimately chose Denver. They went to Denver, and once they got to Denver, somehow, some way, they were bused back to California, and according to them, many of them thought they were going to Indio, but they ended up in Fresno.
The families say that after arriving, they were pointed to the Fresno mission. Matt Dildine, the nonprofit CEO, confirms they provided services for them yesterday. Dildine says he's already receiving backlash from his donors for helping out the migrants.
We are not a political organization. It is not our job to decide what border policy is, nor are we advocating for border policy. It's our job to reflect Christ for people who come to our door. And that's what we're trying to do.
The families are now in a hotel and will stay there temporarily while the county steps in to help. Dyer understands buses carrying migrants from states have been sent to other parts of the country and says what's happening needs a solution.
I don't support what has been done in Texas by shipping asylum seekers all over the country. But I also understand the dilemma that they face in Texas, as well as Arizona, where there's an influx of people coming into their states.
Tomorrow morning, social services will be meeting with the families. Mayor Dyer says they will help the 19 migrants get back to El Paso, where they have a court date to continue with their immigration process. Eliza Navarro, ABC 30 Action News.
Eliza, thank you. So how much is it costing taxpayers to send migrants from the border to cities across the country? Coming up next, the eye-popping number, plus the additional cost when migrants are moved again. Stick with us. Welcome back. Since the launch of Operation Lone Star, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has sent more than 100,000 migrants by bus and by plane to cities all across the country. Now, the 13 Investigate team from ABC 13 here in Houston knows down to the penny how much it's costing Texas taxpayers to move each one of those migrants.
Bus after bus has led to line after line, which has led to political jab.
The governor of Texas is literally invoking chaos.
After political counter jab.
Now the rest of America is understanding exactly what is going on.
Governor Greg Abbott's Operation Lone Star has outraged Democratic-led cities as the drop-off of migrants continues. Tensions are especially high in New York after migrants attacked two NYPD officers. It's all being covered by our colleagues like ABC 7 New York reporter Dan Kraut.
The city has received close to double the amount of migrants at shelters like this than originally expected, and it's draining the city's resources.
And ABC 7 Chicago reporter Liz Nagy.
City shelters are now full, so the city's answer is to allow migrants to live on these city buses to stay out of these sub-zero temperatures.
Here in our warm patch of Texas, we may seem so far removed from this story. We aren't close to New York, Chicago, or really even the border. But we're funding all of this as Texas taxpayers. And since the governor sent off the first bus in April of 2022, 13 Investigates has learned the state has spent $124,603,616.19 busing migrants. Divide that by the number of migrants who've taken what's a free ride for them, and the average one-way ticket funded by you comes out to $1,243.18.
Many Texans will look at that and say, yes, that is a high cost, but then they'll also say there would be a cost if those individuals stayed here in Texas.
Political analyst Mark Jones says the moving of migrants has been political gold for the governor here at home. It's also been gold
for Wind Transportation, one of the main bus companies being used by the state. Invoices obtained by 13 Investigate show the company's billing Texas up to $3,000 a day or $21,000 a week for individual security guards to be on those buses.
The Abbott administration is very sensitive to complaints by Democrats being attacked for effectively being inhumane. He's spending the extra dollar to ensure a safe and comfortable trip.
But for these bus companies, there's a cost for doing this business. We knocked on the doors and visited 4 Houston bus companies now being sued by New York City and cited by the city of Chicago.
We're Channel 13. Is the owner or manager around here?
They're not talking, but their attorney tells us the state is not covering their legal fees.
And the governor's busing program has put so much political pressure on the White House to do more along the border that Texas actually started flying migrants out late last year. We know of 4 flights and put in the public records request, so we could do the math on all of this as well. The one-way ticket cost comes out to an average, you see it right there on your screen, $956.40 each. Of course, there is also a cost that cities have to handle when migrants arrive. In Chicago, the ABC7 I-Team found there's actually a second cost, as some migrants are sent away just after arriving. Here's ABC7 investigative reporter Chuck Gowdy.
Here in Chicago, we're calling it the double migration. Asylum seekers coming to Chicago mostly from Texas at a substantial cost to government agencies and taxpayers, and then going from Chicago to somewhere else. The ABC7 I-Team asking Illinois state officials for a number. How many migrants are coming and going? Our investigation with the ABC7 data team now revealing this double migration. The coming and going is running up the tab for a crisis that already caught Illinois by surprise and continues to stretch government resources and finances. Migrants have been flown into Illinois from Texas, expelled by Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and they have been bussed here by the thousands from the border zone. People fleeing their homeland have become points of political contention, sides of humanitarian debates, and figures on government ledgers. Tonight, even as more asylum seekers arrive here, some continue to leave. The I-Team filed an open records request to find out how many migrants are leaving Illinois, what that costs, and who's paying. Migrant travel costs in the Chicago area, people leaving by bus, plane, and train, total more than $775,000. And when additional travel-related expenses, such as ride shares, are factored in, it's almost $850,000 taxpayer money for migrants to move out of Chicago. 4,327 have now come and gone, more than 10% of the migrants sent to Chicago.
The Texas government will put migrants on a plane, let them, tell them that Chicago is this great place to come, which it is. But they're saying, this is what Chicago is going to do for you. And then when they get here, they kind of see that what was told to them in Texas is not accurate.
On the northwest side, Alderman Gil Villegas' 36th Ward houses some Chicago migrants, and he wants federal authorities to take more responsibility for the relocation of migrants here and elsewhere.
What we don't want to do is put people in a position where they're in a place that really doesn't fit, or maybe they don't want to be here. So we are trying to accommodate them as well to make sure that they have they can go ahead and begin their life here in the United States of America. What we don't want to do is further traumatize these folks. We want to make sure that we allow them the ability and the dignity to have a roof over their head, a meal in their belly, until we can figure this out.
Catholic Charities has provided some of the logistical help in relocating migrants from Illinois. A spokesperson for Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker telling the I-Team that before leaving here, Illinois authorities make sure there is someone on the other end to receive the asylum seekers wherever they're going. And according to records, the most popular destinations for migrants leaving Illinois are New York, Florida, and Georgia, according to records, and even a return to Texas. In Chicago, Chuck Gowdy, ABC7 Eyewitness News.
Hello again, I'm Kevin Ozbek from ABC 13 in Houston. When migrants arrive in a new city, they're often met by people trying to help, but limited by money and space. In New York, police there have actually seen an uptick in crime near migrant facilities. Reporter Josh Eineker from ABC 7 New York shows us how law enforcement is trying to keep the city safe for everyone.
Tonight, only Eyewitness News was there as an army of police fanned out at migrant facilities throughout the city, targeting a problem that's exploded in recent months: unregistered scooters, which cops say have become a persistent quality of life issue, particularly in Manhattan.
We had to come here and we had to do our job.
The first order of business here was they went for the bikes. Dozens of bikes without registrations, some with plates stolen off other bikes somewhere in the city, all immediately carted away on a police flatbed. Tonight's operation was about a lot more than illegal bikes, though. It comes after this melee near Times Square over the weekend when nearly a dozen men, believed sources say to be asylum seekers, attacked 2 police officers. 5 were arrested on the spot. Tonight, police caught the man in yellow, and we're still hunting for as many as 5 more.
We're not going to tolerate that, Josh. We're not going to tolerate individuals attacking our police officers. That's not going to happen. We will comb this globe to look for you and bring you to justice.
NYPD Assistant Commissioner Kaz Daughtry led teams of cops tonight. Some scoured the area around the Row Hotel, a migrant center in Hell's Kitchen, and they inspected more of those bikes, which have been involved in a growing number of robberies and the focus of police citywide for weeks.
We are seeing an uptick on scooter robberies in the city, particularly in Manhattan South and Manhattan North, where individuals are on scooters, normally 2 on a scooter, and they're taking your cell phone, or they're taking your AirPods, your Beats, your wallet, your purse. So we are seeing a little uptick on that, and we're going to be over-aggressively going after these illegal scooters and mopeds that are on our city streets.
And unfortunately, we're also now learning migrants themselves are being targeted by sex traffickers. In Chicago's Cook County, the Special Victims Unit is trying to protect those migrants who are most at risk. Here once again is ABC 7 Chicago investigative reporter Chuck Gowdy.
Many of the 36,000 migrants in Chicago moved here to escape violence and crime. Now the I-Team has determined they are in need of protection here from a despicable criminal element, sex traffickers. Our team with an inside look at SVU Migrants, the tactics a Cook County Special Victims Unit is using to help new arrivals avoid being victimized. But for some migrants, it's too late.
There's a power and control component with that. With traffickers, they want to have people who are under their power and control, and they groom them in such a way where they make it seem like the trafficker is the only person that cares.
Cindy Gonzalez is part of the Sheriff's Special Victims Unit, led by survivors of trafficking or domestic abuse.
We are what is called the landing zone, where the migrants are coming in.
She visits Chicago's migrant shelters to warn new arrivals about trafficking, which is the use of force, fraud, or coercion for sex or labor. Hundreds of migrants attending each session.
In these situations with the migrants, they pose a greater vulnerability because they don't know the language, they don't know the laws.
There's a desperate need for money for a myriad of obvious reasons. And so if you were just to look objectively at who would be a perfect group of people to be targeted by the traffickers, it's this population.
Gonzalez tells the I-Team many migrants approach her after the sessions.
And so in those situations, they realize that they have been victims of trafficking, and they do come up to me afterwards and tell me that they have been victimized of such crime, and they just never were able to put a name to the crime of their situation.
Many of these people have already been trafficked before they got here. Many of them already had this happen to them on their way here.
Chicago police arrested this man last month, Wilson Vasquez, charged with sex trafficking 2 women from Venezuela who migrated to Houston and then northwest suburban Elgin. He has pleaded not guilty. According to documents shared with the I-Team, Vasquez arranged for men to come to the hotel where the victims were located and forced to engage in sexual acts in exchange for money. They were not allowed to keep the money. Cook County prosecutors say the women were held for days in the basement of this home on Chicago's west side. They were eventually rescued at Loretto Hospital. Vasquez had taken them here because one of the women said she was sick, according to prosecutors.
In many cases, they're getting some type of compensation for these horrible acts. So there's this hesitancy to give up on the income, traditionally, and there's also still this fear that floats out there.
An I-Team data analysis reveals recent migration is among the top risk factors for both labor and sex trafficking in the U.S. In 2021, 429 reported victims who experienced some form of sex trafficking were recent migrants or recently relocated, which is 18% of all sex trafficking victims.
There is unfortunately a lack of information for those that are migrating, for communities that are newer to the country, in knowing that type of exploitation is unlawful, that they do have rights, that they have the ability to seek help and services, and that they have rights within this country.
I really try to sit with the individual and really try to help them process their situation and reassure them that this is a crime, that they're not the only ones being victim of this crime, and there are resources for them.
A half dozen sessions have already been held, and the Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart says they plan to expand to all 28 migrant shelters. The Special Victims Unit is also now warning new arrivals about labor trafficking, which is the exploitation of someone purely for financial gain. In Chicago, Chuck Gowdy, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Thanks for sticking with us. We want you to now hear from one migrant who's giving back to his new home in Chicago. Here he is in his own words.
Mi nombre es Kelvin García. Llegué aquí aproximadamente en agosto. Primero yo era como todos aquí, yo iba a desayunar, a bañarme a la iglesia de San Edmund. Ya cuando ya teníamos un tiempo, don Mateo, doña Celín empezaron a decirme que si podía ayudar en la iglesia y todas esas cuestiones, y ahí empecé a ayudar en la iglesia, a repartir ropa, cualquier cosa. La primera persona que me dijo para ayudar aquí fue don Mateo. Él fue el que me dijo que si podía ayudar, ya que no había muchos voluntarios. Entonces de ahí adelante empecé a ayudar y a venir seguido. Ah, ok. Me hace que les digamos. Llego aquí a las 7 de la mañana, ayudo a organizar lo que falta organizar. Después, ya cuando empiezan a llegar las personas, ayudo a recibir. Hay veces que ayudo a entregar ropa o en cualquier otra área hasta después que ya se termina todo. O sea, me gusta que mantengo movimiento, ayudando a las personas. Yo llegué solo, ya mi familia estaba aquí en Chicago, estábamos en una estación de policía, en donde duramos aproximadamente 2 meses hasta que nos sacaron, y ahorita estamos en el Hotel Carlton. Mi mamá no quería que yo estuviera solo en otra parte, y entonces nunca nos fuimos a un refugio porque no nos aceptaban a todos, sino me querían llevar a otro lugar a mí, ellos a otro lugar. Hasta que las personas de OPAL nos trajeron al Hotel Carlton.
Mexico. Yeah. The Spanish way is Mexico, but we say Mexico.
La verdad todavía no sabemos qué vamos a hacer, ya que ni mi papá ni yo hemos conseguido un trabajo estable. Cualquier trabajo sería bueno para mí en este momento, ya que planeo trabajar y si se me hace posible seguir en las noches estudiando. Las personas son muy amables con nosotros, nos tratan muy bien, y la verdad no me arrepiento de nada de haber venido aquí. La verdad que, o sea, hemos tenido literalmente lo que se podría decir, una comodidad. Por lo menos tenemos comida, comemos las 3 veces al día, cosa que en Venezuela es difícil. Por lo menos ayudamos a mi hermano que está en Venezuela, ya que está pasando por momentos difíciles, pues está solo. Entonces, con lo poco que trabajamos, lo podemos ayudar allá. Agradecido con el país.
And thank you for joining us as we continue to report on this issue now impacting nearly every corner in America. I'm Kevin Osbeck in Houston. Have a great night.